All right. You can do the intro in 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to Beyond Boss Fights, gaming, technology, movies, and more.
Hello, everybody. This is Beyond Boss Fights. Once again, we are back with our first ever Corona show.
Hopefully the last one, too.
And I forgot to do the pre-show card, so we just jumped right into this video with our lovely faces. Okay, everybody. This is Brax Wolf, and with me, as always, straight out of Natty, is DJ Pimp Daddy. How you doing, DJ?
Whoop, whoop. Alive and kicking.
Live and kicking. Same here. Same here. It's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's not ridiculous. We should have seen this coming, right?
Yeah, it was inevitable.
It was inevitable. I mean, 100 years, it's about time for something to happen again. It's kind of like those forest fires, It's like we put them off, and then it hits us hard,
I think last year I did jokingly say that there was too many people on this planet and we needed a plague. I regret saying that now.
Yeah, I think that's one that we're not going to joke about for the next few years anyway. Yeah, I mean, this is our reasonable banter section. There's not going to be a lot of banter about the thing that's happening outside of our doors, I guess, but it's unavoidable. It's something you've got to talk about. So I figured we'd probably have a lot of discussion on some serious topics today, I guess. Obviously, we're in my state, and I think your state is very similar. We've been under a stay-at-home order for, I think, 2 weeks now.
2.5, 3, I think, on our side.
Yeah. So
the kids have been out of school for 4 weeks now.
The governor called social distancing to like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then we officially went with the stay-at-home order a couple weeks ago. And so, but really for us, was that different for you? It wasn't for us so much. I mean,
no. By the time the official stay-at-home order came through, almost everybody in Ohio was already at home. So everything was closed. There wasn't anything to do.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess you and I are going to have very similar experiences here, because for a while it almost looked like our governor was just watching what Ohio was going to do, and then the next day he did the same thing.
Yeah.
So we were pretty early on the whole bandwagon as far as putting some measures in place. For in our case, it was because of Chicago. And we had a lot of international travel coming in, and I know that they started seeing cases. The first corona cases that were reported in the country were in Chicago. Yeah. So I know that they've been
about to go to Chicago the weekend that it broke out.
That's right. You had to cancel your trip. So, but it's so interesting how fast everything happened, because I mean, it hasn't been that long since we did a show, and it wasn't even on our radar at that point. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. Nothing. Yeah. We didn't even talk about it because it was just something that was so far away, and all of a sudden just things started shutting down like crazy.
Mm-hmm. And thankfully Netflix saved us all with a Hail Mary, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, well, that was a lightning in the bottle thing. We will talk about that later. So anyway, we're going to get into that in just a little bit later. Before we do, I want to go through our acknowledgments and apologies. I wanted to apologize for our listeners and viewers for being so socially distant lately. Unfortunately, it's required by decree.
And I want to say I'm sorry for quitting beer. I didn't think Corona would be such a jealous ex.
The beer jokes, are the beer jokes still going?
I actually read today that Corona in Mexico finally actually stopped the plant because they were ordered to by the government. Like, they were ordered to shut down.
Okay,
yeah, they were still making it.
I heard that too, but was that just because of the name, or was that because all stuff is being shut down now?
Oh no, it's because everything's shut down.
Okay,
they're shutting Mexico down, but
they're shutting Mexico down. Well, they can just look and see what our state's doing and follow our example. Yeah, so that was pretty much it. Sorry for not being quite as engaged as we could have otherwise, but we're kind of locked at home at the moment. So let's
I think I've spent more time online though. I've
yeah.
been on Twitter probably 3 times as much as I normally would during a work week.
I think
So
that's probably there's some truth to that for me as well. And I think that people are. I don't think that's unique to us. I mean, I'm looking at some of the stuff that's actually picked up on Facebook because it seemed like it was kind of dying down for a while there, and
mhm.
now I'm seeing stuff like they're kind of trying to come up with ideas of things to do with other people using the social network. Right? They're doing the list
Yeah.
of 8 bands that I've seen in person and one that I haven't, and they're doing here's my list of popular things that I don't like, and it's those are the things that happened when Facebook first came on the scene like 10 years ago, and they
Oh
kind of
yeah.
died out for a while, and now people are sitting at home going, well, might as well do this stupid thing again, right?
Yeah. One more round of scraping big data collection from everybody. You're just giving all your information to a database, right? These people realize this, right?
It doesn't really matter at this point. I mean,
That's true.
I'm pretty sure Amazon already knows what I like and don't like, so
Amazon knows what time you get up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night.
yeah, Alexa is reporting back. So
Okay.
anyway, on to non-corona related things, and then we'll jump back in just a second. What have you been playing this week, video game wise?
So I pushed further into Lord of the Rings Online. I've been streaming every other day ish, as much as I can, but within reason. You'll be happy to know that I have finished the actual last quest, and as soon as I stream again, I get my war steed finally. Come to me, war steed.
I I don't want to burst your bubble.
Don't ruin the fun.
Now, honestly, I mean this is interesting because when the War Steeds came out, that was right in the middle of my prime Lotro days. I mean, I was all over East Rohan. That was probably my favorite expansion. It was one of the first ones that I got to do as soon as it came out because I finally caught up with everybody. And it's a good area. It's a very good area. Well designed, fun questing, wide open spaces. It feels like Rohan. They did a great job.
Mm.
But the War Steeds, they didn't turn out the way Lotro really wanted them to, I don't think. I mean, the idea was to have another different way of doing combat, a faster way of doing combat
Mm-hmm.
that still felt kind of like your class, right?
Mm-hmm.
So each war steed, you can fight from war steed. For people who don't play Lotro or haven't played for a while or aren't familiar, you can fight from your war steed. It's the first time that mounts were used in the game for something besides just getting from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
And so you actually have fighting skills that go along with your war steed, and they're different depending on what class you rolled in the game, which is a cool concept, but the implementation was a little bit rough. If you didn't play, now I played a hunter, so it wasn't so bad because a lot of my stuff was ranged combat from the war steed. But I know people who play guardians, and this is your class, I know.
Yeah. I'm like up toe to toe with things. So.
Yeah, I know people who play guardians and champions who are typically up front melee type classes that really didn't like the war steeds at all.
Huh.
Great. And to go along with that, they are hard to steer.
Yeah, I have heard about that.
They're just hard to control. And when I played, and maybe they fixed this some with the 64-bit client, but when I played, the game was never designed to go that fast.
Gotcha.
So when the war steed got up to going full speed, that's when your hitchiness on the game really kicked in, because it was just like it was supposed to be flying by you, but it wasn't repainting correctly or something, because it got very hitchy on the war steed. I know some people that went back to just riding regular horses as soon as they were done with Rohan because they're like, forget this.
Yeah.
So you'll have to report back and tell me what your experience is once you get to that.
I'll probably be streaming that, but twitch.tv/DJ Pimp Daddy. Anyways,
ding ding ding.
Shameless plug. I was playing Dragon Quest Stars and I hit the paywall and I lost my mind and I deleted the game in my account, so I'm not going back.
Is that a
Uh,
mobile?
yeah, that was like a MMO-ish kind of a Dragon Quest game for mobile, and some of the other podcasts I follow, the Dragon Quest shows, they were the same exact thing. Everybody was just like, "Oh my God, this is going to change Dragon Quest, and this is the way." Blah 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 blah. And everybody was playing, and everybody's playing for weeks, and then the free thing ran out, and then just about at the same exact time, you could tell when every single person was just like, "Oh, my free trial's up," and just like, "Well, this game sucks now." So yeah, I'm just like, it's just not worth. It painfully slows the game down to a crawl. The advancement just stops. You gotta wait so much longer to for things to refill, and the physical speed of how the game plays slows down. Like to have it run and fast forward where you do fast battles, you have to pay $8.99 a month for a mobile game, and I'm like, nope. Walked away from that one.
Well, this is mobile game design, right? I mean, isn't that kind of?
Yep. Yeah, yeah. And I it was parts of it were fun, but the story is absolutely forgettable. And it's a Dragon Quest game, which traditionally the story is supposed to be, on a platter, right? And it just yeah, it was easy to put down and walk away, I don't feel bad for that choice. Whatever. Today we rolled our characters for a D&D session that some of my old coworkers and I are playing over a WebEx session. We just rolled characters today, so I don't know if that counts as playing.
Yeah,
but
it does.
I got to use my gigantic 20-sided foam die as a joke. And then at one point, one of the new players was just like, we're not going to have to put up with people singing and stuff. And I busted out my lute and I started singing, and I almost got banned from the WebEx call.
How many people are playing?
I'm a bard. There's like 6 of us on the phone call. So.
Okay, that's not real big.
Yeah.
So
apparently I embarrassed them.
But you're not the DM.
I'm not the DM. No.
Okay.
I'm just the bard.
He's just the bard.
I'm a DJ.
That makes sense.
And then from peer pressure, I installed Witcher 1. And that's as far as I've gotten.
You haven't started that one?
I haven't. No. I've been trying to spend more time doing constructive things around the house, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I'm vlogging a little bit more, but I choose a little project every day and I just chip at it. Otherwise you just get sucked into the computer, and as soon as I'm done with my project, or as soon as I'm done with what little gaming I have, my wife being furloughed now, at the end of the day after dinner, usually we just sit on the couch, and then at that point the day's over, because you're just we're just gonna binge watch something like what we're going to talk about here in a bit.
Right.
So what have you been playing?
Well, you just reminded me. I didn't have it in my section in the show notes here, but I have been playing The Witcher 3 a little bit more.
Nice.
And the reason for that was because I decided to watch the series on Netflix. And The Witcher 3 is a good game. In fact, parts of it are very, very good. The cinematics are amazing. It's like they, I mean, and I know they do this, but it's like they specifically directed it to be a film. The cutscenes and everything are just fantastic. The story is very good. I have never completed the story, and now I'm a little bit nervous too, because I started tweeting a little bit about what I was doing, and people started coming back and telling me that the story changes based on some of the choices you make, and I'm afraid, because I did so terrible in Mass Effect 2 and 3. I lost so many crew members in those games that I'm afraid to do anything.
Captain.
I'm afraid to do anything lest I kill off all of my favorite characters inadvertently. So I've actually kind of stopped playing that, although it's a fantastic game and I will get back to it. Sometimes I just have that single player itch, and right now, to scratch that itch, I've been playing The Witcher 3 a little bit. More recently, though, I was very fortunate to be able to take part in a media preview server that ZeniMax set up for press and streamers and YouTubers to get a first look at the Greymoor chapter that's launching in late May, early June. So
YouTubers, aka the new press.
The new press, yeah. And
Your
that
old press
was there's no denying that.
Do you have like a hat that has a press card in it?
Did I tell you I got a special press wristband when I went to the event? That was kind of cool.
Ooh, you've been marked.
If I would have been drinking alcohol, I could have gotten as much as I wanted for free, but I wasn't, so I got as much ice water as I wanted for free. Yeah, so the Greymoor chapter that's launching in ESO this summer, I got to play. It's a kind of a funny balancing act when you do that, because I don't want to play through the story. I want to see the story when it's fully baked and in production. So the thing I was trying to do was just kind of hit all the things I wanted to write about for Massively OP. So I walked around Solitude and took some screenshots, and I explored around till I could find Blackreach and went down there and took some screenshots. I played around with the new vampire skill line, which they're completely revamping. Yeah, I mean, so all of the things I knew I wanted to write about, I hit those things without trying to spoil too much for myself, because in the quote-unquote old days, I never hit the beta server because I didn't want to know anything before the actual game launch. But now it's part of my job, so I kind of have to go in and take an early look.
I get paid to do it. Damn it.
Yeah. And I got to admit, there's some satisfaction in knowing a little bit more than I can actually talk about. It's kind of fun to see people discussing what, and this is what the devs go through all the time, right? To see people discussing what may be coming and knowing, yeah, you're right on with that, or no, yeah, you're pretty far off. That's kind of fun every once in a while. And I only had like a week's worth of, I guess, foreknowledge before the embargo was up anyway. So it's not like I knew a lot more than everybody else. But it was one of the things that was impressive, I think, to me about the way that ZeniMax did it this time was I think the last one and the last couple times they've done it, they've given us some kind of a press walkthrough or a tour of a dungeon or something, and then they've set an embargo date that's like 3 weeks out from the tour. And then in the course of those 3 weeks, they'll release information about the upcoming release, but we can't talk about it until the embargo's up. So it's kind of like, you're undercutting me, man. I mean, I'm trying to, trying to write something up about your game, but you're putting all the information out there before mine's allowed to come out. So by the time mine comes out, it's 2 weeks old, and people are like, well, why are you writing about this now? So this time, it was very impressive that they gave us access to the server. They said, your embargo is in 1 week. Your embargo date is 1 week away. You can post up to 10 minutes of video. You can post any screenshot you want. Just try not to, I think the advice they gave, or the plea they had for us, let's say, was don't put too many like placeholders out there, because there's obviously stuff out there that's, here's a texture that we're going to put in later. It says placeholder or something on it, or temporary. I forget what it said, but he's like, try not to do too many of those. But basically they gave us free reign, and they said, the embargo is going to lift for everybody on this date. And then they tweeted about it the Friday before the Monday when the embargo date was up. So they were kind of hyping our stuff up for us before it came out, which was nice, because instead of them releasing information that we weren't allowed to release yet, we all kind of did it at the same time. And it was kind of like, for us, it was a win because we were releasing information new on the day that everybody else was. And for them, it was a win because it was like a PR bomb, right? All of these sites just opened up with all this information at the same time. And I really think that's the best way to do it. It's kind of a win-win.
Yeah. That works.
So yeah, so my impressions on that can be found at massivelyop.com under the Tamriel Infinium column. Ding, ding, ding.
Sorry, I'm vlogging. Say hi. Say hi to YouTube.
Hello, YouTube. You know me a little bit, but not very much.
Finagling cameras. I have 6 cameras on this desk.
I wondered what you were doing there. It's kind of hard to tell because when you hold the camera up to your shoulder, it's blurred out because
Oh yeah, I got the blurred background.
You think it's a
It smooths it.
yeah. All right, so now let's get into the monster in the room, the elephant in the room.
It's a censored camera. The monster in the room.
The whole reason we're doing a podcast at this particular time because we really don't have anything else to do.
Carol Baskin. No, that wasn't the topic.
We'll get to her. I'm sure we'll have something to say about Carol Baskin. So the pandemic, which shall not be named, but has already been named, which I guess technically isn't the coronavirus. It is a coronavirus, right? My
Correct.
understanding is it's like the corona is a family of viruses, and COVID-19 is one of the distant cousins that never comes to visit until just now.
Something like that. Yeah.
So how has your life changed since the COVID-19 hit the U.S.?
I told people that I think my ideal job would be doing remote IT support from my house. And this is a really good trial run of that. I have the direction to go in as needed, and I have the blessing to get past the security guard who's keeping everybody out of the building, right? But for the most part, my entire company is 100% remote now. And I'm doing cloud support remotely. The only time I ever have to go in is if hardware physically breaks, right? Which happens. And I mean, potentially it's maybe once a week. The good news is I have enough infrastructure to where if one machine just completely Chernobyls, right, then you just turn it off and the cloud self-heals, right? So you just kind of shift workloads around. It's gonna be fairly rare that I would ever have to immediately drive into work to fix something. It would be some catastrophic problem, So, but work aside, it's been challenging to deal with. My wife's been furloughed because nobody's going to movie theaters because they're closed. My kids have been home for 4 weeks now, and they're just driving us both up the wall. We send them outside, and either they only stay outside for 5 minutes, or then some neighborhood kid comes over and doesn't understand social distancing. And then we're like, oh, well, now you have to come back in to finish something. We come up with something to bring them inside and save them. I've seen good things and I've seen bad things. The good thing, I think, is I've seen a lot more friends and family actually actively reaching out to each other. I FaceTime my parents and even my brothers probably every other day, which is something we never used to do. We would only see them once every week or two. But then on the flip side, you're just you see people that don't get the social distancing, and of course you got the problem with hoarding and, the scarcity of specific things. Our local economy, as far as the Kroger's ecosystem of grocery stores, is recovered probably 90%, I'd say. I went back, we got 2 weeks worth of groceries, and then I went back last Friday, and there was only a couple items that were still out. And obviously, the toilet paper and that, and I don't know why everybody bought all of the pasta. I didn't need any, but I just happened to walk by and saw the hole where the pasta used to be. But the water aisle was completely stocked again. I wasn't buying any, but it's there, So people sort of came to their senses, right? Slowly, but it's just, you know, the whole logistical chain of moving supplies around the company or the country is just, you know, it just takes time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to see how, like, in the post 9/11 world, everything was about security, right? And now it's just kind of like there's some things that have just like now it's totally fine to wear a mask and walk right into a bank, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's just like up till now, you'd probably get shot, right, for doing
Right.
that. You're like, oh, this guy's gonna rob a train, right? And now it's just like nobody blinks an eye about it. I love the fact that part of me loves the anarchistic aspects of this where we completely just shook the system loose of just all these stupidity things, like the idea that companies can't do remote work, right? And then suddenly now it's just like, oh, suddenly, you know, my company has 20,000 people on a VPN right now. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's the idea of just like testing the system that far never would have even came to fruition unless this had ever happened, right? So I don't know. I hope that we have the world 2.0 when this is all over, if that makes sense. Like, I think part of this was kind of needed, but it's the byproduct is, you know, obviously the losses of human life and that's very unfortunate. So
Yeah, I'm very, as I think of this, and I try not to be, I try not to be too calloused because I understand that we were probably much better positioned and much more fortunate than a lot of people,
yeah.
being that I can work from home, and being that I work for a company that really does try to do good by their employees. And in fact, the
Mm,
ones that cannot work from home, at this point, they're still considering them on administrative leave. So they are paying the people that can't work from home, even though they're probably not doing any work while they're at home.
mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful for the fact that I live with 5 other people, so loneliness is not an issue for me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is something that other people struggle with, and I see people talk about it in social media, and my initial gut response is, well, it's not so bad. And then I have to kind of take a step back and think, you know, this situation is probably a lot different than mine.
Yeah.
I do not at this point have anybody in my family that's on the front lines.
Hmm.
My wife has done some training. She's a registered nurse, and she doesn't typically work in a hospital, but the facility that she works at is attached to a hospital. So they did bring them in to do some COVID screening training
Hmm.
when this thing first went down in preparation, but she has not been called in to do that yet. They're giving the hours to the actual nurses of the hospitals first, giving them first choice. So she went into the training and she hasn't been back to work all week. So fortunately, I think they did ask. I mean, they gave her the option. They said, you know, we know you've got kids at home and stuff like that, that you may not want to be exposing them to anything. And I told her, I said, you know, I think you should probably do it. And I, not because I wanted her exposed necessarily, but I mean, I just, if 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 this is as bad as everybody says it is, they're going to need all hands on deck. And
Yeah.
again, fortunately, the area where we live, we are not seeing a huge outbreak.
Hmm.
We probably aren't being tested as much as in the larger cities either, but it's not like the hospital that she works with is seeing an overload of patients or people needing to be tested or anything like that. So, you know,
Hmm.
either we're still behind everybody, or we were fortunate that these measures were put in place at a time that it benefits us because it hadn't gotten here yet,
Hmm.
or it wasn't
Yeah.
very widespread yet. You know, it's hard to say at this point, but we've just been very, very fortunate. And so there are other things I think that I'm thankful for, and yet we're still kind of working our way through this, so it's hard to say whether we're actually going to make it through unscathed or not.
Yeah.
The economy's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah.
Those of us that were fortunate enough to have a 401k are watching that value diminish quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, really bad if you're almost retirement age. When you're still about 10 years out, like you and I are, it's not as big of a deal. I mean,
we got some time. Thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, we can wait it out, right? We have time to wait it out. So
talk to me about, because I know our kids are dramatically different age differences. Like for my kids, they almost see their daily Zoom calls with their class and their teachers almost as like amusing, right? Like to them, like they just get pass fail grades. Like you have like high school kids or nearly college kids, right?
Yeah.
So that has to be wildly different experience for them, just coming out, especially coming up to the end of a year of school. It's just like,
I think strangely enough,
did they even have like prom? Like, is that gone?
I think it's gone. And again, it doesn't really affect us because neither of my kids were looking forward to that anyway. So it's just not really up there. That's not their thing. My daughter's a freshman, and I think she will probably eventually go to a prom. My son is a junior, and he went last year. And he didn't get much out of it. He didn't think it was that much fun, so he wasn't going to go this year.
He went by force.
Yeah, kind of. He went with two friends that are girls, and they all kind of went as a group. And
did he now?
It was okay. I mean, he's like, eh. So yeah, I think the thing so as far as classes go, again, I've been fortunate. My high schoolers are fairly hands off. They're pretty good at getting up and getting motivated. And I don't think what they're doing right now is nearly as challenging as what they were doing previously when they were going to school, going into the building. My son just kind of acts like, hey, you know what? I get up, I do my stuff. It takes me like 2 hours, and I'm done with the whole day.
Yeah.
And I guess when you take some of the garbage out, that's probably about how long it's going to take.
Just from you saying it just like that sounds lovely. You don't have to dress up. You don't have to go sit on the bus that's bouncing up and down.
I think the biggest thing for us is that's a big question mark academically is that the junior year, like my son is the time that kids normally would go in and take the SAT, which is for those of you not in the U.S., that is a standardized test that all high school juniors take that colleges will look at when you're applying to colleges, and they'll look at your scores. And it's not the only thing that they look at usually, but it's when I was going to school, it was a major factor. It's becoming a little bit less so now that standardized testing is being viewed as unfair, which it probably is in some ways.
Like the system.
So the question is, they usually have 3 dates for the SAT. Usually the first one is the one that the juniors take in school, in class. They'll actually take class time out of the day and take the test. They've canceled that one. They've canceled the second one. They've only got 1 date left that hasn't been canceled, and I think it's sometime in the summer, like early summer. So there's a possibility that they all 3 could get canceled. And then the question is, what do you do? Are you going to let them take it in the fall? And if you do, is that enough time for them to get scores back into colleges before they start applying? So that's really the biggest question mark for us right now. And nobody has any answers. Nobody knows. So we're not really sure. I know some colleges have said they're not even looking at SAT scores anymore, and maybe they'll just do that for the whole class of 2020.
And also, at least with like
2021.
the gap of instruction, will they remember the stuff?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
So as far as, I have a lot of kids. As far as my college age kid, he's also very hands off right now. He has, I think, at least 2 classes that have gone totally online for the rest of the year. One of them is using on-demand video, so he can do it whenever he wants. And one of them, they meet a couple times a week live. I don't know if they're using Zoom or some other meeting software, but again, he's doing just fine. My youngest is the one that I kind of have to watch a little bit more because his school, he goes to a private Christian school, and they're a little bit more well equipped to, because they're smaller, they have fewer students.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little bit more well equipped to do one-on-one stuff with the kids. So they're actually continuing their education probably heavier than the high school is. They're still going to do their science fair. They're just going to do it virtually. This kind of stuff. They're able to. He has a call with one of his teachers every single day, and then they have like quote unquote office hours every day too for kids that have questions. So he's still working quite a bit, probably even more than any of the other kids who are older than him. So that it's different. I think that this generation is pretty well equipped for it, though. They're probably more well equipped for this type of learning than the teachers who are attempting to learn the new media platforms.
Yeah, I heavily picked up on that on my end too. Like the teachers are struggling. Even in our Boy Scout troop, right? I suggested as the committee chair, I'm like, hey, why don't I set up a WebEx? We could continue having virtual meetings. All the adult leaders are like old men, and they're like, oh, let's just not have meetings. Like they're terrified of technology. And I'm like, we just can't win.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's something in the garage. Sorry about that.
That sounds like a ring cam.
It's a ring cam.
I've got that notification too.
If it keeps going off, I might have to go unplug that. So another amusing thing I noticed was, as you know, I've been sort of dieting, and I haven't been exercising with my diet. So far, I've lost all my weight via just general diet, right? I've done my bike to mortar, but that's not really that much exercise. Now that we're confined to the house, the first 2 weeks of confinement, my weight plateaued, and I think that was because we were like stress eating a lot at the time, right? And finally, like, I started going back down again, which is fantastic, but it's amusing to see how, like, just doing a little bit of like the projects and the chores around the house sort of makes up for the lack of exercise just from physically leaving the house and walking around at work, just basic things. But to sort of cope on my end, to keep things a little bit on a level keel, every day I still wake up and take a shower, and I, put on comfortable clothes, but I'm not like going to work, just half naked or something. But
yeah,
I do get up and groom and clean myself and comb my hair and brush my teeth, all that fun stuff. It's nice to keep a routine. But yeah, my wife, on the other hand, is just like, oh, I don't got to work. I'm going to sleep till noon. So
we're attempting to get out and take walks, and it's not too hard to do when you've got a puppy in the house. Right? He's not really a puppy. He's a little under 2 years old, so he's very puppy-ish. But he does need to get out. I don't know if you're familiar with the Golden Doodle breed, but they have a lot of energy.
Oh yeah, my neighbors have one now.
Yeah, a lot more than I thought when we got one.
He runs up and down the fence line all day.
Yeah, so we take him on a walk, and we either go to the dog park and throw the ball for him and then come back. And that's probably about 1.5 miles to 2 miles to do that. Or we go all the way around the lake, which is almost 4 miles. And so that's what we did today. And my legs get pretty tired from that one.
That's 4 miles.
Do that a few times a week, and my knees and hips start to feel it a little bit. So
that's your 10,000 steps, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I was still I have a regular watch, man, so I don't know, but.
Speaking of, I took it off.
Oh, really?
I'm naked. I just like, because I'm just sitting around the house all day, and Twitter's just blowing up, and my friends are now bombing me on, Google Hangouts all day. It was just it was annoying, and at the same time, it was also annoying me. Be like, you haven't walked like 100 steps today. He's like, shut up, watch. So I finally just like, you know what? I'm done with you, watch. And I took it off.
Did you have one of those Apollo 13 moments where Tom Hanks ripped off his health monitor? And
I thought about it, but no. My Apple Watch honestly has been sitting on my nightstand on the charger, which probably isn't good, for 2.5 weeks now, I think. I'm like, there's no sense in keeping an Apple Watch if you're just stuck in your house. Like, if you're not physically going around or driving or, I mean, it's just like, I finally hit the point. I'm watchless.
See, I think at this point it would feel weird if I didn't have something on my wrist.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's been a couple years
nice
now, so
it's very freeing. I don't have any shackles.
right.
I'm not shackled by the Apple gods.
So I guess maybe the last question after I have a couple more here. When do we think it will end? Which is, I don't even know why I put that question in there because I think at this point nobody really has any idea.
Do you think this will go through the entire summer?
Yeah, I mean that's
summer inside.
when I first honestly, when I first heard the strategy, the flattening the curve strategy that they put out there, that was my thought was this is going to take months.
Yeah.
This is not something that's going to be over in 2 weeks like they were saying. This is going to take probably through at least September. That was just my gut reaction because there's just so many people to get through, because when you're flattening the curve, you're not squishing the virus necessarily. You're just drawing out the time period from when people are getting it and hopefully not overwhelming the healthcare system in the process. So that's, it's kind of like instead of burning twice as bright and half as long, you're burning less bright, but taking a much longer time to get through the burn. Right.
Yeah.
So that was my fear, I guess. And I think that was probably the president's fear, honestly, which is why he did so much for the economy early on, because that amount of time without people working or without money being flowing through the system could be pretty devastating, economically speaking. Not even just loss of life wise, just everybody would be impacted. Everybody would be impacted worldwide, really, because everybody watches our economy, right? So yeah, I don't know how long it's going to take. I guess my hope is that people keep talking about, well, it's got a 2-week lifespan and then it dies off or something. But you can't you can't continue to one thing we can't do is continue to flatten the curve until they come up with a vaccine and have the means to distribute that to everybody, because that's going to take another at least 10 to 12 months.
Yeah, and that's why I think no matter what, even if it squashes down, we're still going to have these flare-ups all the time. So at a minimum, I think best case scenario, we're always going to be at least localized quarantining, entire cities at a time for weeks. That's probably going to be the new normal, which is sad, but it is what it is.
Is this something they're going to have everybody take the vaccine for, you think, once they get it done?
If you don't take it, you're dumb.
Yeah, right.
Not to put down any anti-vaxxers that watch our show, but you're stupid.
Or misinformed. Let's soften it up a little bit.
If you can't take it for some really medical reason, I'm sorry. But if you're never mind. We'll leave that aside.
Do you have your masks? Now the CDC is recommending masks.
We have some cloth masks that were made for us from a very good seamstress in the family. So we have those. I found one single used N95 mask that I had purchased 3 years ago, and it was still coated in drywall dust. So I used a shop vac and I resuscitated that thing back to life. The rubber on it's very brittle, so you can't pull it really hard. So that's our going out mask. And then when we got back, like I took it to Kroger's. That's the first time I left the house in a mask. It was a very weird experience, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't even plan on wearing your glasses. That was like within 3 minutes. I'm just like, well, this is a mistake, and I took my glasses off. um, and then when we got back, we doused it in alcohol spray and just let it sit there. So hopefully that somewhat makes it better. But it's like everything else. We're just like making this up as we go along.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't. We don't have any masks yet,
We've
and
decided to just like not go out unless it's like one of us, right? So we're not going out as a family to
exactly. And
Kroger or
I
something.
was trying to think of a time that I would need one, because since this whole thing started, I think I've only been out once, and that was to get gas in the car. And I don't. That was just because the gas was cheap, not because I was actually driving the car anywhere.
Gas is very cheap right now.
So I filled up probably about 2 weeks ago, and I haven't gone anywhere since. My wife does the grocery shopping typically, and so she goes out. She has gone out by herself recently. I used to accompany her, but now she's going by herself, and I don't think I've been out at least for 2 weeks. It's been at least 2 weeks since I went out, and so I'm not really sure when I would have the occasion to look like a ninja.
I I have literally been kept up at night with thoughts of going out to Kroger's dressed up as the Ice Ninja from Mortal Kombat.
There you go.
That has literally kept me up at night. That or going to Kroger's as like a cowboy with a cowboy hat and a train robber thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Minus, the guns, but I'm just like, we should just mix this up, make it funny, right?
All right. Well, I mean, I don't know how much we could probably talk about COVID for a very long time. I know it's been. I was telling my wife as we took our walk today that, it's interesting that I saw a Bernie Sanders sign in somebody's yard, and I said, we haven't talked about politics in like a month.
I know.
It's been completely taken out of the news cycle.
Well, let's end the COVID talk with this. Have you had any revelations of things that you're like, this is the new 2.0, this is what I'm going to do going forward, right? Has any of that crossed your mind?
Well, I mean, the only thing really that's different for me, other than, like going to church and visiting relatives and things like that, and going to kids' soccer games, which you can't really do virtually, is working from home every day. And I already knew I could do that. It just wasn't up to me, We work I work at a very big company, Fortune 50 company, and the culture has always been come in and be at your desk. Now they do let me. I did work from home. There were certain times within my career that I've worked from home more often than now, because of maybe they were ramping up for a really big project. They had a whole bunch of externals in, and there was no room in the actual facility for people. I mean, they were like overrunning the cafeteria and stuff. So they were encouraging people to work from home. But then when that all went away, everybody came back because it's the culture, and it's very difficult to change the culture of an entire organization.
Yeah.
So we knew we could do it, especially those of us in the IT field. We knew we could do it. It's not that hard. I mean, if I'm doing it once a day or once a week, I could do it every day. I mean,
yeah.
There's no difference between this one day a week that's special that makes me be able to work from home. So I don't know. I mean, I think I could do it. I mean, I do think there are some nice things about going into the office. I think training to do something, it's easier when you're right there with the people that are providing you with the information, especially when questions come up, because you can just walk down the row and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I ran into this. Have you ever seen this before? That is easier to do than IMing somebody who's showing red all day long, because they're always in conference calls or something.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'd say 90% of what I do could be just as easily done from home. How about yourself?
I like I mentioned before, like the fact that I wanted to get like a full-time work from home job. I'm seeing how I think long term, like if I wanted to do that, I really have to like make some significant adjustments to my environment, right? One of the best things I did was behind this green screen, I actually have my work desk. Um, I set up a completely separate desk and monitor and keyboard and mouse, so I'm away from the gaming system and all that, and I'm doing work, right? So it's just a change of a direction. Literally changes your mentality, right? So you're just not like, oh, if I'm facing that direction, I can't watch Netflix, right?
Mhm.
Because my work computer is like we're we're single tunneled, right? We don't do split tunnels. Um, that's a technical term for you people out there.
And it's a good idea, by the way.
um, Another thing, like last year, I actually started thinking long term, and it was because of tornadoes that started it. But I was just like, I wanted to sort of make like a minor prep kit, right? And I literally had an idea of a tornado or a windstorm or a snowstorm knocks out the power grid to my neighborhood for 3 days, right? And you have just enough food and stuff to sort of survive, right? And like this pandemic sort of pushed that extremes, just like we're way beyond 3 days of food and water at this point.
Yeah.
So like I think when this is all over, I seriously want to get maybe like a 2 week sort of a thing, right? Set up. I think that's responsible at this point upon most people to at least do that. That way, if something happens again and you're caught off guard, you're not panic buying, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and another thing, I guess the last thing is like I think long term it's like really pushed me to maybe at least in my wife's um, field. It's like I don't know if being a manager of a theater is like a long term goal. Like maybe she should become like an entrepreneur of some type, right? So maybe this will be the catalyst when this is all over, So that's she's found a lot of time to do crafting now. So and she seems to love it, and I'm like, maybe that could be your thing. So it's like once the economy recovers and people have money to buy stuff, it's like maybe that could pan out into something that's not a movie theater manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I as much as I joke around about vlogging and YouTubing, I don't ever see myself being a full-time vlogger, right? Like I'm not gonna quit my job to be the next Casey Neistat, but at the same point, I could see the people that I follow on YouTube are just devastated by this. So it's like maybe it was a good idea not to do that. It's like the whole gig economy is just destroyed at this point. So, oh well, it is what it is.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting. I talked about politics. It'll be really interesting to see once we kind of get beyond this crest if it's going to hit like double time because we're going to be in the election cycle and it's going to be they're going to be taking a lot of looks back to see who knew what when surrounding the whole corona thing. So and it'll everybody's going to have their eyes on what is the government going to do to help us out now that it's over, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's great that we got the stimulus, you got $1,500 or whatever it is, $1,200, but this thing's lasted however many months and I still don't have a job. So now what?
yeah, yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I mean, there's going to be a long tail on it, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah.
But anyway, we need to move on. We have a lot left to talk about. Not the least of which is
Get it over with.
so
Rip the Band-Aid off.
we finished watching the Tiger King series last night.
Oh, it's
And
fresh in your head.
I we talked about this on our walk too because there's so much to talk about. And I told my wife, I think that what's interesting about this series is that it's a 7-hour documentary, right? There's 7 episodes, but you could probably do a podcast that lasts about 20 or 30 episodes just talking about the series, right?
Hmm.
There's so much to talk about. There's
I
so much
think
to go over.
I think there is actually a podcast series about it.
It
I've heard about that.
wouldn't surprise me in the least. And the weird thing about it is you watch the first couple episodes and you're like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen, and you don't realize that the first 2 episodes are really just kind of, to use the roller coaster analogy, you're just going up the hill at that point.
Hmm.
You're just
Oh
going
yeah.
up that first hill. They're just kind of cranking you up slowly. And then when you hit 3, 4, and 5, that's when you're really on the roller coaster. It's crazy.
It's like I saw somebody describe it perfectly. Let me think. What was it they said? They said something like, every time a new character gets introduced, in your mind, you're immediately thought as, oh, thank God, maybe this person will be the one that talks some sense into these people. And then, like, 10 seconds later, nope.
I think the weirdest part about it is, for me, the weirdest part about it was I kind of, going into it and hearing what some people had said about it and just looking at, obviously, the splash screens that they put on Netflix, my thought was, this is going to be like a reality show, right? They're going to have
Yeah.
the dramatic cuts and the music and the pauses and the slow-mo. They don't have that. It's just a documentary. But
Oh.
so what's funny is you're going along and you're kind of on board because it's done in such a serious documentary style, and then all of a sudden you stop and go, wait a minute, did he just say he got his head zookeeper off of Craigslist with no experience? That's what he just said, right? And so, you have moments like that where you're like, wait a minute, and they say it was like it's like nothing.
Yeah, yeah. You just found a guy at the bus station.
Oh, and another moment, and another moment that hit me just recent. I think it was last night we watched, or no, it was a couple nights ago. We watched the one where Joe Exotic, who is the kind of the main character of the documentary, ran for governor of Oklahoma a couple of years ago, and they just, for a brief moment, flashed the results on the screen, like on a TV in the corner of the room. And they cut back to something else, and they didn't say anything else about it. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Did that say he got 20% of the vote?"
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
he came in third.
yeah, they just said he lost, but wait a minute, 20% of the people who voted in Oklahoma voted for this guy for governor,
I know.
but they didn't even mention it. And it's like, wow.
You just gloss over that.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know how to explain this to a podcast listener who hasn't seen the show,
Yeah.
other than to say that it's kind of about the seedy underbelly of the big cat trade in the United States of America. And it goes into great detail following this one zookeeper who may or may not be legally handling his tigers and lions. But it also touches on several different, they call themselves zoos, they call themselves sanctuaries. They're all animals in cages, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And they're exploiting these animals. I guess there's really no way around saying that, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're breeding them so that they can have small tigers for people to pet because that's where the money is, or to sell off to another zoo or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And it's disturbing from that aspect because it's, the animals are obviously mistreated. They're obviously being exploited. They're not in the best living conditions from what I can tell, from the glances you get in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you watch the statistics flash on the screen and it shows that, I don't remember how many tens of thousands of tigers are in the United States in these zoos, but it's at least 4 or 5 times the number of tigers in the rest of the world in the wild. So in a sense, they actually are conserving the species.
Yeah.
So
It's really screwy.
it's really screwy, right? So you don't really know how to feel about it.
But all the players involved are cartoonishly just over the top. Like, and the thing is, like, even though it's like some people claim to be better than the others because it's like a he versus she versus him, it's like a three-way standoff between all the main characters, right? None of them come away from this looking good,
No,
you know?
no, not at all.
it's like
Which is what
yeah,
made your Game of Thrones comparison that you sent me make even more sense. Because there is no good guy in this whole thing, right?
yeah.
Nobody deserves to be the Tiger King because they're all horrible.
Yeah, yeah, it's like, yeah. None of them are good. Even if they claim like, "Oh, we're the good people," like, no, you're not.
Right? You're doing the exact same thing as everybody else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
these people walk amongst us.
I don't know if I can recommend people watch it. It's just one of those things. So the only way to understand it is to watch it, but I don't know that I could recommend that to you.
Yeah, I've told my friends who were completely like, that sounds dumb, and then you're just like, just watch one episode, just watch the first episode, and if it's like 42 minutes long, and if that just doesn't click, then just don't watch the rest, right? Then watch The Witcher instead.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how else to explain it. There's a lot of underhanded stuff going on. There's a lot of con artists. There's a lot of felons involved.
Yeah.
There's one episode where they go interview a guy, I forget if he was in Texas or Florida, who basically went from the drug trade to big cats.
He was making more money off the cats.
I'm not completely convinced that he's out of the drug trade all the way either, but he seems pretty. I mean, and there's another one where he was the one. That was the one. They couldn't even get into the compound until they found somebody who used to work for him who made a call so they could get in to interview him for the documentary. And the documentary has been in production over 5, 6 years.
Yeah, I think it was 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
So there's a lot of material there, and it's mostly chronological, but they do jump back a little bit and forth to tell different people's viewpoints.
Mm-hmm. I think overall, I liked the way that they broke up the episodes, because at the end of episode 1, you're like, okay, this is clearly the bad guy and these are the good guys. And then like episode 2, you're just like, oh dear God, these people are even worse, And then episode 3, you're just like, oh, this third party is just like, she killed him. It's like I love how it's just like it keeps like twisting your mind, and you're just like, what just happened?
Yeah, let's just say by the end of it,
you're just like, you're rooting for all the bad guys.
Don't pull for anybody. Just sit back and watch. Don't pull for anybody, because you'll just be disappointed. We
watched it in 2 nights. We watched the first 3 episodes, and then we sat down and binged the last 4 episodes. And like my wife and I just could not stop talking about. But for like 48 to 72 hours, we were just talking about it nonstop. And even now, a week since watching it, my wife and I are still texting each other throughout the day a funny meme, right?
Yeah.
like those would just keep coming. And I'm like, this is the best time ever in humanity as far as memes.
And I think what kind of pulls you in and keeps you thinking about it afterwards is that it seems. How do I say this? The resolution basically, I don't think this is a spoiler because they start the very first episode interviewing Joe Exotic from a prison cell.
Yeah.
The resolution is that Joe goes to prison. But it's not really, you don't really feel like it's resolved at the end of it. You feel like there's a whole lot more there that needs to be uncovered.
Yeah.
And so why do you think this took off like it did? I've heard a lot of speculation that it's just that we're all locked at home alone with nothing to do.
Well, I've thought about this, right? And I've heard some of this sort of mirrored, some of my thoughts were mirrored on some YouTube channels that I watched too. So I was like, that's exactly why. It's because at the end, or during the last few major depressions and recessions, right? Um, People would flock to the entertainment industry for escape, right? And if you look at history, right, the Great Depression, right at the end of that is when there was the golden age of Hollywood, right? The Wizard of Oz came out that just blew everybody's minds away, things like that, right? Uh, I think like the 2009 financial meltdown, Harry Potter, right? It's just like people look for fantasy and escape, right? They want to get away from their day to day depressing, atmosphere of like being stuck in a house because the economy's gone, or because there's a pandemic, right? And as a result, like Tiger King is almost fantasy. Like it's just so absurd that it's just like it's completely just made up. Like a little kid made up the plot line, right?
Yeah, that's
But but at the same point, it's just relatable enough, right? You can be like, okay, I could see that, So like, it is like the perfect storm of fantasy escapism, relatability to some or all of the characters, um, people having enough time to sit there and watch a 7-hour documentary, and the fact that because people are trapped in their houses, um, traditional cinema is practically destroyed at this point. And now the real winners, honestly, are the Netflixes and the Amazons and the Hulus, right? And this was probably, as far as Netflix goes, this is probably one of like their most defining moments. So it was just a perfect storm up to this point. And like I said, it's the fantasy and escapism and at the same point the relatability to these just weird cast of characters. So that's the success behind Tiger King.
someone's in your garage again.
And someone's in the garage again.
Yeah, so I think that's a good take. Interesting to me, the entertainment industry. I think Disney did a very smart thing by bringing their latest Pixar film to Disney Plus months ahead of probably when it would have been released on there normally. And we watched it a couple of days ago when it first came out, I think, and it's a good film. It's a good family film. Onward, I think, is what it's called. Yeah, my son's saying yes, it's called that. My forgetful father. It's a good film, but I think at some point Disney went, hey, this was supposed to be our big release this spring, and now nobody's going to the movie theaters. In fact, they're all closed down. So instead of just taking the loss, they moved it over to Disney Plus. They didn't give Disney Plus away for free, so people still have to subscribe to it to get the film. Mm-hmm. So they're making some money off of it, even though it's not going to be anywhere near where they were hoping for. Which that's what companies do. They're smart. They find a way to make money on their investment. So I mean, it's interesting to see that. So maybe that's something that gets disrupted throughout this whole Corona thing. Kind of to bring it all the way back. Maybe the entertainment industry realizes that there are some other avenues here to release some of our content besides just going to the theater and then going to video and then going to streaming or whatever that timeline is.
Have you noticed that people like me who run just like a stupid vlogging channel have more production value suddenly than some of the evening newscasters and nightly comedians?
I was thinking that
like,
exact thing.
Everything's flipped, and it's amusing to see like the Jimmy Fallons at their house struggling to get basic things like lighting and audio, right? Without a team of people to do it for them, and suddenly it's just like, and also without an audience to laugh.
Yep.
some of their monologues aren't really funny. Just like I would heavily watch YouTubers and get so much more entertainment value than I do out of like what's TV's attempt at trying to entertain us with live entertainment.
Yeah, that really struck me when I saw the John Krasinski thing, which was quality content, by the way, because it's John Krasinski and Steve Carell. And
oh yeah, I watched that.
I mean, those guys are just good. I mean, they'd be good in an empty room, right? But just watching, the way that he did his show, I'm thinking to myself, this reminds me of those early YouTubers that probably everybody in Hollywood was making fun of. And now here they are back trying to do the same thing. So I had that exact same thought when I saw some of those. And Fallon was another one. He's got his kids making up his placards or whatever.
And some of the YouTube content creators I follow have actually taken up things basically saying, now's our time to start a revolution. It's like just like some of them are really militant about it. Like, let's take down TV. And it's just like, whoa. It's like, can't we all just share this? Space?
Yeah. But enjoy this time.
Yeah.
It might turn into something for you.
A late night comedy without audiences is unbearable. That's
who's still good?
I can't watch him.
Who's still good though? What? John Oliver is still good.
Yeah, it's weird, but he still puts out good stuff.
He doesn't act any different whether there's an audience in front of him or not. I mean, he delivers it perfectly no matter what. He's got a way of doing it.
Yeah. I think he even made like a self-depreciating joke or whatever where he said, he's like, I'm an English comedian. It's like, I'm used to not having an audience laugh. It's just like...
I did want to mention that I watched the Netflix series The Witcher, and I would highly recommend that to anybody who enjoys very grim, dark fantasy type stuff and isn't bothered by rated M, because it's very rated M. It's very well done, very good. But just to kind of breeze over that one, it got me back into the game, and it actually got me to purchase an audiobook of the first Witcher novel too, which is also was going very well until I stopped commuting to work every day, and now I'm kind of not listening to it because I'm not in the car.
You could simulate your commute. You could just go out to your car and just sit there for 30 minutes and waste time.
Thoughts crossed my mind. So what are we into?
So one of my projects I finally put my foot down is I'm trying to self-install my level 2 charger for my electric vehicle.
What is that?
Requires running a 220 volt outlet to the garage, which is like a 40-foot run. So I'm learning basic electricity and code, like electric code, basically.
Is that just an improved version of the charger for your car's battery, or what is that?
Right now I have a level 1 charger, which runs off of a 110 outlet outside my house. It takes 14 hours to fully charge my car from dead. The level 2 charger, since it's 220, it'll cut it down to 3 hours.
Okay, it's 220, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was unaware that there was different ways you could do that.
Yeah, and like if you go to like the supermarkets and things where you see like the big Tesla chargers, those are level 3, and I think they're 440 volt chargers. Those can charge a Tesla, I think, in like 2 hours. It might be like 45 minutes. But the Tesla batteries are massive, right?
So you got to buy
you put it in my car, it theoretically could charge my car in like 10 minutes, right? But you can't plug 440 into my car.
Nobody has 440 in their house. So do you have to buy like another kind of converter or a generator, or how do you charge a Tesla?
The people that have chargers installed at their house are doing it level 2 chargers. There's only like to get a supercharger. It's like that's an industrial engineering thing that needs done. Like nobody has a supercharger at their house that I know of. just because it's the whole 440 thing. It's like nobody has
Right.
that kind of power going into their house.
Right.
Now,
Exactly.
people just do the 220, and in their case, it would be, they'd charge it overnight kind of a thing. So, but if they're running low, they could stop by a supercharger and just juice it up, So
Cool.
it's an electric thing. I'm trying to learn electric code for Ohio, and I'm not saying I'm picking up a skill that I want, but I'm doing it by myself since I don't want to invite a person into my house during a pandemic.
Yeah.
So, and I got the time.
That sounds to me like it may be a little more complex than replacing a screen.
Yeah, it is significantly more complex. And you saw the state of my garage, right? I have to run an electric conduit around the outside of the garage. That's the big part, is just me on my hands and knees underneath shelves and stuff and cussing and stuff, because there's no way you're going to move all that stuff. So.
Well, I guess in a way I'm kind of experimenting myself. I'm finally, I don't know if you remember several episodes back where I started to play the theme song and it just kind of stuttered because my CPU was overwhelmed by the fact that I was trying to record video and
we used to stream
play
this.
audio at the same time. Right. It was
we used to stream this live.
Appalled might be the better word. It was appalled that I was trying to do such things. So I kind of had my eye on an upgrade back at that time, and obviously, there's always something else to spend money on, especially when you've got a family and kids in high school. So, that stuff kind of gets put off and put off and put off, and you think you're going to save for it, and then you look at how much it's actually going to cost, because the further you get from the technology that you purchased last time, the more expensive it gets to upgrade it to something new. And so what happened was I needed an upgrade. And I realized, I guess, as I was doing my taxes back in February, that the fact that I now am a professional journalist for video games means that I can I can claim my PC bill that I write my stories on as a business expense. So even though
not going to fault you on that.
Even though the PC that I build is probably going to be more than the money I make writing for Massively OP this year, I'm still going to go ahead and do it. It's everything kind of fell together. I was fortunate to get
God bless America.
I was fortunate to get a bonus from my day job at the same time, and my Christmas money I never spent, stuff like that. So, long story short, I'm building a PC from scratch. And the original plan was to just upgrade this one and get mostly new components, but kind of reuse some of the stuff. And at some point, my wife came down and said, well, if you're not using that old one anymore, can we bring it upstairs and let the kids use it? It's better than the one they've got. And I thought, that's a great idea, actually. And
thanks, wife.
It means that I can pretty much buy all new components now. So
I will admit, it's nice to have a greenfield build. In everything you do in life, it's so much easier to start fresh than to try to retrofit something.
It's absolutely true. And so there are some things that I'm finding that are interesting about now versus 5 or 6 years ago when I built my PC the last time. So I went with a more powerful processor. I'm going with an i7. Last time was an i5. I'm going with a higher end GPU. I usually go mid range. I try to hit that $250 price point. This time I went with the GTX 2080 Super, which is kind of like the top of the midline or the bottom.
That's $250 now.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
No, trust me. I was not shooting for that price point this time. I would say maybe it's even the bottom end of the higher tier graphics cards. So it was expensive.
It was expensive.
And so every time you make a decision like that, there's a ripple effect. And the ripple effect with going with an i7 this time is that you kind of have to go with a water-cooled solution, because you can go with an air-cooled solution, but the coolers are so big
Oh, yeah.
for those things now. I mean, they're like they don't even sit on top of the processor like parallel to it. They actually are perpendicular. They actually have heat sink pipes that sink onto the CPU, and then the fan is perpendicular and it's supposed to, if your motherboard is built right, it's supposed to blow the air from front to back, be one of the pieces of that airflow. I did see a lot of builds where the motherboard didn't have the CPU mounted in the right way so that the air cooler actually blew either up or down within the case, which up isn't so bad, I guess, because a lot of PC cases have ventilation up at the top, but blowing down is blowing right at your graphics card. so that's kind of stupid. So anyway, yeah, you can do that, but I figured instead of messing with that and having another fan in there that could break or be very loud, I'm just going to go ahead and go with the liquid cool solution, which is a closed loop, which means you don't have to put water in it. You don't have to service it. It just continually cycles. And
that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So that's going to be new to me. I've never done a liquid cooled solution before. It sounds pretty cool. It comes with a radiator. That's how the water gets cooled. You stick it in front of your fan so that the air coming into the case cools the radiator, which cools the water, which, it's just... So it's a lot of learning. I watched a lot of YouTube videos as to proper placement of the radiator because there's different schools of thought on that. Do you put it on the intake fans or do you put it on the vent fans? Do you put it at the top of the case or do you put it at the back of the case or do you put it at the front of the case? Or, and there's people that have done experiments on all this stuff and have come up with good numbers. And honestly, it's probably going to come down to where does it fit in my case. That's a major aspect of it too, because it's very, very difficult to look at something on Amazon and go, yeah, I think that radiator looks like it's going to fit in that slot. And I'm sure there's a bracket that's going to hold it there and the screws are in the exact right spot,
Well, that's why I sent you that PC parts builder, right? Where you could see people's finished systems, right?
Yep.
That was a great place to start, but yeah, it's still not going to be 100%.
Yeah, it was. It really did help me because it kind of showed me what it was a gaming / streaming build, which is what I was kind of going for. Mm-hmm. It showed me the CPU to go with, it showed me the graphics card to go with, and it showed me the motherboard to go with. And so having those three things nailed down helped a lot. And then I kind of fudged a little bit on the memory. I went with a higher timing memory and a lower amount of gigabytes, and I went with the same case, but I went with a different cooler. Here's another thing, and I'm going to complain just a little bit for a second here. You cannot buy higher end enthusiast PC builder parts without having some kind of clown lighting going on, right? Everything at the higher end is RGB. You can't get around it. And then they charge you extra for it. It's really annoying. I mean, can't I just have a simple build? So, okay, so here's what I did. I went with the stuff. I'm going to try and make the RGB work, even though I've never cared about it before, because it's there. I've paid for it. And I'm never going to see it because it fits down here under my desk where nobody ever looks.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have a PC that's flashing like a carnival all night long.
Yeah, mine glows red. And I actually did put it on the desk for that reason. But recently until I get like a USB dock, I plug and unplug stuff chronically all day. With all the cameras and accessories and stuff, I need direct access to USB ports.
Right.
Now I could probably just get like a hub or something and stick it on the desk.
That's what I ended up doing.
Hide the computer, but
yeah.
I've also noticed, like in my case, since I have a cat, keeping it on the desk, I could visually see when it needs cleaned out. Right. If it's on the floor, I would forget about it until it catches on fire. So, pluses and minuses.
Yeah, I'm going to have to...
With the water cooler, it is significantly quieter. To get big fans with the water cooler, it is so quiet that I could barely hear it. The only time it ever winds up like a hurricane is when I'm rendering video. So
cool. That will be nice.
Yeah.
I would say
And
mine's not too
playing
loud
games at
now.
like ultra settings and not even caring. Like
Yeah,
it's like you don't
yeah,
even test it. You just throttle it all the way up to max and just hit play.
yep.
That's nice. Like when that hits you for the first time, you're like, I could just turn this all the way up and not care.
But it's kind of fun. I mean, in this time when we're so worried and anxious about stuff, it's kind of nice to have something to be excited about.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
my wife even told me, she's like, "Wow, it's kind of fun to see you excited about something." You know, it's because I'm talking to her ear off about it. She has no idea what I'm talking about, but it
She
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
care. She
Doesn't
doesn't
matter.
care. She just sees the bills.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
not
she was.
jumping to 4K, are you?
I'm not changing my monitors out,
Okay.
so I don't think this one is 4K. I'm pretty sure
So you
it's
can
not.
run 1080 like really, really fast.
My understanding, and this could be wrong, this could be completely wrong, but my understanding is when you've got a small screen like this, like your monitor, which is I don't know what 17 or 21 inches or whatever it is, the resolution isn't quite as big of a deal. But I'm not a videophile, so somebody's probably going to call me on that one. But I mean,
Yeah.
my understanding is that the big screens, definitely like your TVs, you can definitely tell. But when you're looking at a computer monitor and you're only, I don't know. I don't think it's quite supposed to be quite as noticeable.
Yeah. Yeah. Is what it is.
All right. You have anything to look forward to?
No.
I noticed you left it blank.
just I've given up looking forward. I'm just looking at the now.
Yeah, I had a very tough time coming up with anything other than what we've already talked about, getting the PC built and testing that all out.
Run out of Tiger King to watch. I got nothing, Brax.
Okay, well, we'll skip that section then. We're not looking forward to anything at this point.
Yeah. Boo.
We did have a couple of questions. I thought this was an interesting one, and it goes along with the theme of the show. From Jonathan Andrist on Twitter. Jonathan's a longtime Twitter friend of mine who I met in my Lotro days. And his question was relevant to you, especially, DJ. What is your theme music for your self-isolation? What have you been listening to?
Oh man. I started listening to this actually back in January. I came across it on Spotify. The band Anti-Flag released a new album, and I haven't listened to the band Anti-Flag probably almost 10 years, right? I think the last time I actually saw them play live was the Warped Tour 97, if that takes you back. Their album was such a freaking it like connected with my soul. Like it was so good. And it's like one of those albums where you could listen to the entire thing end to end, and every song is just great. And I used to say that like Green Day was just like one of their finest albums was their anti-George Bush album American Idiot, right? And I kept joking. I was like, Green Day, with Trump in office, Green Day's going to release an album that just ends all of humanity, right? Because I was like, this is the moment, right? And then they finally released an album, and it was just like they just like phoned it in, and it had nothing to do with politics or anything. It was just them trying to make pop music or something, and it was just like. And Anti-Flag released that album of just like hate, just anti-politics and anti-war, and it was just like, oh my god, this is what I wanted from Green Day. And I must have played that probably 30 times, the entire album, while working in January. And then as things sort of folded shop and we're stuck at home, I put it down, and I was actually going to buy tickets to go see them in Columbus, Ohio in May. And I'm kind of glad I didn't buy tickets now. But now I also regret the fact that I won't get to see them anytime soon. So, it is what it is. But the entire Anti-Flag new album has been my theme music. I think it's called 2020 Vision is what they called it. But it's just like if you just want to like vent and like thrash around and just hate on the system, that's your album. I highly recommend
Okay.
Anti-Flag's album.
Well, we're gonna go yin and yang on this one. Mine has been, and these guys haven't done anything new within the last maybe 6 months. I think their last album came out 6 or 7 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite bands of all time is Switchfoot. And John Foreman has been, like many music artists, because they are sitting at home and they don't know what else to do, has been releasing some of his music, I think one song a day since the kind of self-isolation thing
Wow.
came about. He's doing like an acoustic number every day of one of the songs that has been on one of their albums. And so I've been checking out that on Facebook. He did one recently called Souvenirs, which was a good one, talking about it's kind of a sad song, talking about, but at the same time it's kind of hopeful, talking about all of your memories from your past being souvenirs that you take with you into the future. And so basically, in one hand, it's kind of sad because you're looking back at a time that's never going to happen again in your life. But
Yeah.
at the flip side of that is make the most of today, because that's tomorrow's souvenir, right? And I think a lot of Switchfoot stuff has always been very kind of hopeful and upbeat from a message standpoint, even though it's very realistic and some of it's a little bit forlorn. It's they've got one that's basically called "We're Gonna Be All Right," and that was one that he did a few days ago, and it's just hey, we're gonna get through this. It's kind of like. It helps them to sing this stuff because, like I said, this is what they do, and now they can't do it, so they're finding another avenue for it. But it also helps other folks who are sitting around with a lot of anxiety about what's going on, I think. And it's kind of an upbeat, uplifting, let's get through this together type of attitude, which is, like I said, just the exact opposite. Depends on what mood you're in, I guess. You can go with DJ's pick if you're feeling very angry and vengeful, or
I mean, mine, I haven't been very anxious or anything about stuff because I think, in my mind, I just thrash it out and, then I move on. Burn some calories too.
Everybody has different coping mechanisms. We have no judgment here.
Like my music just wants to make you just shove somebody, just because you're just like.
He's got a mosh pit at home with his 9-year-old.
I win in that situation, by the way. Physics.
Now, the second question we had is one that we've held over for a while, and it's from Loco Storm on Twitter, who happens to be my son. He asked us, it's actually a pretty good question. Is there anything you want to do that you feel like you haven't done, anywhere you want to go, or someone you would want to meet? It's kind of thought-provoking.
Yeah. See, this goes back to that whole thing of the last question under our coronavirus thing. I was like, how does this change you, right? It's like I just want to get out more. I want to live.
I had a hard time with this question, honestly. I thought we should try and like hash through it a little bit, but nothing immediately jumped to mind. Especially the who do you want to meet part. I don't know. I mean, I've met some interesting people in my life. I don't have anybody that I think that I'm just dying to have a conversation with.
Don't meet your idols.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
If I saw Rivers Como ever walk up to me, I'd be like, nope, and just walk the other way.
I'm middle-aged, so it's not like I'm going to... I've kind of learned, and I think the don't meet your idols thing is kind of going down this path, which is... everybody's human at the end of the day, and everybody has flaws. So, I guess it's very difficult for me to idolize people. I mean, I respect them for what they do sometimes, and I admire people's talents. But as far as actually wanting to, to actually meet somebody, I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head. Now, what I did think of was some places that I'd like to see at some time in my life. I've been to Europe once. When I was in high school, we took a Spanish trip to Spain and Portugal, which was pretty cool. So I got to see another part of the world, even though it was within the confines of a school trip, which is kind of a bubble in some ways. Yeah. One place that I would like to see is Rome.
No nude beaches is what you're saying.
I'm not saying that. Rome. I think the ancient Rome is somewhere that my sister went on her honeymoon, and she brought some photos back. And I thought, man, I would just love to see what's left of the Colosseum. You know, I would love to walk those streets and think, how old is it? Who has walked down these streets? You know, that's one place. I think some places in Germany would be really fun to see. I've seen photos, and it's a beautiful area. Germany, Austria area, you know, those are kind of cool. Although I think I would struggle with language barriers and things like that in a country that doesn't speak English.
I know. We used to, at least on our old Steam podcast, we used to always joke, we're like, our someday pile of video games. We're like, someday we're going to play all these video games in our Steam library. And now that we have this opportunity to where we could literally sit down and probably try to play all the video games in our library, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't have patience for bad games anymore. So like if the game isn't good, I just don't want to play it, you know?
Yeah.
So
I guess the other one I wrote down here was I'm gonna visit Roger Edwards in London at some point.
Nice.
I would like to go to London. I think England would be, even though anywhere in the UK would be fun to go to. I'd love to see Stonehenge. I'd love to see parts of Scotland and Ireland. I've got ancestry that comes from the UK, so it'd be fun to kind of go back there and see some of that. And I guess I definitely would drop in on Roger if I was over there. I think that would be hilarious to meet him in person. If you don't know Roger Edwards, he's Moderate Peril on Twitter. He does Contains Moderate Peril, the blog, and sometimes podcasts.
I'd like to think that I sort of sparked him into streaming more.
Maybe.
I hope that's the case. Because I gave him so much crap over streaming him opening loot boxes once. That's our running gag between the two of us. It was like, loot boxes! Good times.
Well, DJ, I say we're coming up on, an hour and a half or so. So I think it's probably time that we give these people a break so they can go back to whatever it is they were doing pre-Corona show.
Because clearly they're listening to this in their cars.
Yeah.
On their way to their works.
This one's going to take them like weeks to get through, so
I know.
It's going to fit in perfectly with our release timeline.
Yeah.
As far as feedback, we didn't get any feedback on the previous episode or any previous episodes for that matter. If you want to give us a review, please go out to iTunes and do it. We'd much appreciate it. You could also send your feedback to braxwolf@gmail.com. I'll read it on the podcast. This is also a reminder that Beyond Boss Fights is available in a myriad of other places that accept reviews, such as, where else are we? Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. We're all over those places.
Does Google Play still exist?
Hey, shut up. If you want to contact us, DJ is at DJ Pimp Daddy on Twitter. You can email him at djpimpdaddy@gmail.com. His Twitch channel, which is more active than mine, slightly, is...
Well, it's twitch.tv/djpimpdaddy. But, more importantly, I brought back XP Quest. So, look for XP Quest on Anchor.
I forgot to mention that. That's correct.
We're on Anchor now.
So
which puts us everywhere.
Did you break away from Players Alliance, or did you buy it out, or what?
No, okay. We just started doing the show again. We didn't tell Drac, and we started streaming on their. I started streaming on the Players Alliance feed one night, and he found out about it in the middle of the show and came in in the studio audience, and he was laughing his butt off. He loved the whole idea.
Good.
We just sort of took over the radio airwaves. So
XP Quest is rated M for mature.
Yeah.
As far as me, you can contact me at Twitter at Braxwolf. That's BRAXWOLF. You can email me at braxwolf@gmail.com, or you can just shout into the ether and I will surely reply with carrier pigeon.
Just go outside, cup your hands. Braxwolf.
Yep. And true to form, I forgot to start the outro, so here is the outro. We'll see you next time, folks.
See ya.